How you doing? Hello everybody and welcome back to the Educated Collins Snap channel. Today we're going to be talking about some decks I've been building after the patch, right? Just some new builds, some new ideas with some of the new upgraded cards or nerf cards, stuff like that. So it should be a fun one, lots of cool ideas. I haven't went full crazy deck design, but you know, they're fun decks, so let's get started. All right, let's get right into it, right? So I have 5 decks for you guys today. Just decks that I've built, decks that I've played with. They're not as fully refined as usual. Like usually I will spend multiple days fully refining, making sure it's very apt to the meta. I wouldn't necessarily say I did it for all of them. I wouldn't say they're bad or anything like that. I've been playing with them, right? So they've done well for me. But maybe there's a little bit of nuance and stuff like that, or maybe there'll be some cards that don't really make sense to you, right? Maybe they make more sense in my particular meta cycle, right? Like since I'm in the top brackets, people are playing weird stuff sometimes, so sometimes I'll have things that are in there just to deal with that. But if you're not seeing those cards often or anything like that, then feel free to adjust, right? So first one we have, this is kind of like the Darkhawk Loki fusion. That's the name here, where I put in Loki in a Darkhawk deck since they moved Loki to 4 cost. I think it makes sense to kind of take advantage of that. If you're playing Zabu, then that isn't necessarily an issue. And I would say this might not be true for you, but I'm seeing not that much Mobius. There is some, but it's definitely not enough where I'm like, oh my god, this deck's unplayable or this deck feels really bad. So if you are seeing tons of Mobius, right, then maybe you want a different deck. But for me, I'm not really seeing that, so I can kind of get away with something that's very Zabu Loki centric here. So we're still running some of the core cards here. I don't have Quinjet just because I don't think it's needed here. Quinjet's definitely very vulnerable. I would say right now a lot of people just don't really care too much whether your Loki's coming out with a Quinjet or not. It's really just depending if your Loki comes out at all, especially with Collector being buffed again. So with Zabu, you still have that 3 cost Collector, which is really nice. Something very nice is you're generally going to be doing a lot of double 3 cost plays on turn 6, right? Where you go maybe Darkhawk, Loki, Arlad, Loki, that kind of thing. Another nice thing is that even though we don't have late game, right, Loki can give you late game. So you're not really too worried about the lack of late game in this particular list. And you just have some tech cards that I personally like. I really like Killmonger right now. A lot of people are running Nico. A lot of people are running things that have 1 cost in there because of Elsa as well. So just having Killmonger for me is a tech thing that I like. Rogue is just decently good. If you're playing into Mobius, right, then there's an answer to that as well. So it's not like we have no answers to Mobius. It's just you shouldn't be as scared of it as you might be to play a deck like this. So, and then we still have the Darkhawk package. Still big fan of Darkhawk. Still think it's really good. A lot of people are playing Thanos right now. So the Darkhawk is just a very nice answer into that play to give you something to contest, maybe their dinos or anything like that. So just a very nice, powerful tool. And then we have these 1 costs, even though they might get Killmonger, they're not super important, and they're annoying in their own way. And then we just have general good quality cards. You'd say maybe Sentinel could be something else if you'd rather play something else instead of Sentinel. I could definitely see that, but it's just a nice card that you can just play and fit your curve. And a lot of times on turn 5 you might play Sentinel in a 2-drop, right? So just been a good card for me. I like it in this list. So this is one of the lists I've been playing. I've been enjoying just a fusion of the Loki Darkhawk deck. It's been doing decently well for me. So that's the first list we have here. Fun little list. Next up in my list of random nonsense, I guess we'll do the other Darkhawk deck. So this is another Darkhawk deck. It's just definitely full-fledged into Darkhawk and not adding the Loki engine. I would say, I mean, the Loki engine has its benefits for sure, so it's not necessarily, but this one's definitely fully Darkhawk centric. I would say the only, like, some of the advantages, right, is you get to play Mystique, so you can go Darkhawk Mystique, but it's not super core. And then you get to play Absorbing Man, which I think is really cool with the Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is a card that people, at least in my games, they don't really play around anymore. Like, ever since Eliath, like, Shang-Chi is still there, but it's just not, like, people are just brazen with their big cards on 5 now. Like, people just play their Dino on 5, like, they don't care anymore. And if you have a Shang-Chi, you can really just mess them up. So I mean, I do that too. I play my Darkhawk on 4, right? Like, just like, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are not running Shang-Chi. So if you do have Shang-Chi, it could definitely do some work. And you definitely get some nice combos with Absorbing Man, where you can go Rockslide Absorbing Man, which is nice. You can go Shang-Chi into Absorbing Man, which can be very game-changing. Things like Shadow King, if you want to copy that as well, is pretty often. But a lot of times you're copying the rocks or something like that. So it just gives you some synergy to make these really, really big Darkhawks and Mystiques and whatnot. So it's definitely a little bit more one-dimensional in that I would say you do need the Darkhawk to feel good about the game. So there's maybe that weakness. I definitely like having multiple win conditions in my decks, but this one is as one dimensional. I guess you could argue that Shang-Chi is a win condition, but that's only in some matchups, so it's not really fair to say, oh, we have multiple or 2+, right? So this one is just something I've been playing as well. Just some Darkhawk decks, always like testing it out to see how it's good, and it's been decent for me, especially into the Thanos matchups that you're seeing a decent amount. Next up, we're gonna go with ramp spectrum. Yeah, that's fun. So this is a deck I was building for the spectrum, just to kind of take advantage of the spectrum buff. Big fan. I like spectrum as a card. It's just sometimes hard to justify not running some premium non-spectrum card, like non-ongoing cards. There's some on reveals or Jeff or something like that. They're just really, really good, right? And it's hard to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to not run these premium non-ongoing cards to play a spectrum deck. But with this ramp, I think I can kind of justify it here. So we do have some generic ramp stuff. We don't like, every card in here is ongoing, which I think is kind of nice. We have this Namor, which I would say is a little bit weird, but it's just something you can play and it's its own lane, and it's just like fine, right? Like, it's just like, yeah, it's 11 power. With Spectrum, it's 13 power. If you claw into a lane as well, it's a lot, right? Like, you can get into like very high levels of power with just a Namor and like a claw. So there's that in there. And then we just have some like good 5s and 6s. Orca, I think, especially once again in its own lane, 16 power with Spectrum, 18 power. Like, that's very powerful. So it's just something you can really just take advantage of. Another thing I've been trying is this Invisible Woman Ebony Maw combo. I actually think there's something here. Like, this is just a good thing to have if you're running like a non-flood deck and you're playing Invisible Woman, right? Like, I just think turn 3 going Invisible Woman Ebony Maw or so, something like that, is just very strong. Like, 10 power turn 3, like, very strong, especially when your opponent doesn't know exactly what's in there. I do feel like if this becomes common, then they'll know, right? But no one does this. I don't see anyone doing this, so this is just a me thing, right? But like, you just throw this in there, and it's just like a lot of tempo that people just don't expect sometimes, that you have that much power in that lane. So this is just something I've been doing, and I've been finding success. There are some awkward scenarios where you draw it and you're like, oh, I can't play it. But like, a lot of the times you're playing one card anyways, and you're like, I'm not playing, like, I'm going to be playing my 4 into my 5 into my 6, or my 5 into my 6 into my 6. So it doesn't matter that you drew into something that you can't really utilize. So I've been having some success with that. I want to find another deck. I have some decks, right? Like the dump deck, right, also uses this type of thing. But I want to find a deck where I can like squeeze in casually without having to go out my way. That's what I'm thinking. But for now, like I've found it in this decently well, and I kind of like it. So that's this particular build. Next one we have will be Thanos with Nico. So this is just like a Thanos build because I got Nico. I decided, yeah, I'll get. I feel okay. So in terms of Nico, I looked at Nico's coming again in December, right? Late December, and it's next to Havoc and another card that I already had, right? So it's like, do I want to get Nico and Havoc? And I was just thinking, not really. Like I'm not a big fan of Havoc if it stays the same. So I was like, I'd rather just get it now and play with the card, see how good it is, instead of waiting like a month or 2 months essentially for a Havoc. So I decided to just get it. Didn't take me all 4, so wasn't too bad. And I've been playing with it. It's a fun card for sure. So definitely don't mind if you grab it for yourselves. But yeah, generally this is just a Thanos build with some tech tools. I generally like running tech in some version of my decks. Like almost all my decks have some answers, right? I feel like if you're playing like a solitaire, if you're playing like a solitaire deck, then your deck better be like insane, like Wong level shenanigans. So my decks are usually not Wong level shenanigans, so I usually like having some level of tech in there. So get to run the Shadow King, get to run the Killmonger, get to run the Shang-Chi as well. You would say like this deck is a little bit weird because we're running Death, and I agree with you essentially, but honestly, it's not that bad. Like this deck has a lot of draw with the stones and the Nico sometimes, and that's just a card that can be surprisingly effective in some matchups, right? There's some locations, some matchups, especially to destroy, where they just don't expect you to throw the death in there. And if you're running Killmonger, right, and you're just like you're not really focusing on going for playing with the stones and stuff like that, just destroying them and then having a death randomly out of nowhere, it's like just fine, like just solid. I will say the Sarah hasn't felt super necessary. Like I like it because it gives you a really nice option with the Psylocke on the Time Stone, right? If you don't want to play Professor X, you can just drop a Sarah, and then your last 2 turns are really powerful, right? But generally hasn't been super core, so I could definitely see myself changing that out. But other than that, I think it's been pretty solid for me. So wanted to share with you guys. It hasn't went through the rigid testing where I'm like, oh my god, it has to be. This is the perfect card, right? Which is usually what I do. But yeah, here this one is like my version of Thanos. There's definitely a lot of Thanos Nico builds, so I'm just throwing myself in there as well. And the last one we're going to talk about, I believe, is ongoing Daredevil. However, there's no Daredevil in there. There was initially a Daredevil. And then I took it out for this Invisible Woman Ebony Maw thing. This is another version of Spectrum, essentially, but this one has a little bit, it's less reliant on doing that and just has like other good cards. I would say the weirdest thing is probably the Mr. Fantastic, but the card is fine. Like, I don't know. The card is generally fine. It's a 3/6, right? Like, it's not a bad in particular card, especially with Spectrum. It gets a lot better. So, there are some things you want to be paying attention to, especially the Iron Lad, the Jubilee. I don't have Howard the Duck. I feel like there might be a consideration here to play Howard instead if I had it. I don't, so I'm not tossing it in there, but that is something that goes through my mind. Like, ooh, I would love to know exactly the guarantee. And if I ever do get Howard, that's definitely something I will be considering building for myself. But right now, I don't have it. So, what can you do? But generally, the idea for this build is still ongoing. So you just have to make sure that you're putting a card down almost every turn. Like turn 1, you usually don't play anything. You're not playing Ebony Maw on 1. Ebony Maw is usually a turn 3 play with another 2-drop. But you want to just be playing a card every turn, a 2 into a 3 into a 4 into a 5, that kind of thing, right? So generally, if you can get a card down, you generate a lot of power, like a surprising amount of power. And always the Invisible Woman is like pretty good in just like denying what you're trying to do, right? Your opponent doesn't exactly know what you're trying to do, so you can definitely get some leeway, and you can play the Spectrum into the Invisible Woman, right? You turn your Ebony Maw into a 9 power with Spectrum. Not bad at all. So this has been fun, I would say. Definitely a fun build, something you definitely want to try. A lot of little text. We're running a little bit more normal. So we run Doctor Doom because we're running Blue Marvel and stuff like that. We're running Jubilee. So the Blue Marvel is not bad. And the Iron Light has a lot of good hits in this deck, I think. So you do have to be aware, right? Like you don't want your Iron Light to be hitting like the Maw, I guess, is the worst thing in here, but generally that doesn't happen, right? So generally these are fine. I guess hitting Invisible Woman also is kind of like blah, right? Everything else I think is fine, but those two are like not that great. But that means there's a lot of decent hits, right? Like if you got an early start with like these two in your hand, you're probably doing okay, right? Like these two are hitting something really powerful. So that's something to keep in mind, right? You want to be making sure you know what's left in your deck and snapping when you are in a favorable position. So that would be my thoughts on this particular build. But yeah, those are my 5 that I wanted to share. It's not like my only decks, but those are the ones I have been really messing around with after the patch, and they're good enough that I want to just share it. And sometimes I'll play a deck, off stream or whatever, and then like the whole meta, right? And I never share it. And maybe that's like not good for you guys, but it helps me climb. So I decided I'll just share some of the stuff I've been working on after the patch. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Those are my decks. What do you think about them? Actually, I don't want to know. I know my decks are fine. Like everyone's like, what is with this weird card? Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, generally, hope you guys enjoy it. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Educatedcollins, Snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel, Snap. Your skills will be improving. How you doing? You'll hit infinity and won't go back. Educatedcollins, Snap.